Christmas-themed characters are typically depicted as merry, jolly, and cheerful. That, however, is not the case for today's subject, who happens to be a very, very naughty girl. Created by the highly acclaimed and beloved Paul Dini, writer of pretty much all of our childhood favorites, and perhaps most notably as one of Harley Quinn's two daddies, meet Jingle Belle, spelled with a double L, like Disney's Belle. Jingle is Santa's half-elf daughter, who despite having a very cute and innocent look, happens to be a wild child. And I don't mean your typical fun party girl who occasionally gets a little carried away. Jingle is the real deal, a self-centered, self-indulgent, disobedient, rebellious, foul-mouthed pixie who always lights the town on fire. Now, it's quite easy for characters of this nature to come off as unlikable or hard to love, but that's not the case here, because Jingle Belle also happens to be quite charming, cleverly funny, and despite her rocky exterior, she also happens to have a good heart, deep down, somewhere, hidden underneath. Now, for those wondering, what is Jingle Belle's story about, and what makes her so great? And perhaps most importantly, you might be wondering, why on earth would Santa's daughter be a half-elf? Well, in Paul Dini's continuity, Mrs. Claus is an elf. And not just any elf, but the Elf Queen. And just how did they meet? Well, a long time ago, a tyrant with cryokinetic powers, meaning ice powers, like Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat,
Get over here.
or Elsa from Disney's Frozen,
Let it go. Let it go.
named the Blizzard Wizard, captured all the living creatures from the North Pole, enslaving them and making them work in exchange for their lives, including the elves and their queen, the beautiful Mirabelle. These elves were forced to carve sculptures for the amusement of the Blizzard Wizard, until one day, a brave man liberated the elves from their captor, a hero simply named Santa Claus. With the help of his animal friends, Santa was able to defeat, subdue, and eventually cast out the evil tyrant, forever banning him from entering the North Pole and from leaving the icy caverns, bringing back peace to the North Pole and all its residents. The elves were so grateful for their rescue that they vowed to help Santa in his mission to spread happiness and joy to all the children in the world. Of course, Santa Claus and Queen Mirabelle fell in love and eventually got married, and soon after, they welcomed their first and only child, Jingle Belle, making their lives happier than ever. That is until she hit puberty and all hell broke loose, meaning friends, booze, and of course, cute boys. In other words, trouble. Jingle's stories usually center around her tumultuous relationship with her father, which oftentimes results in the most quirky situations. And even though Santa loves his daughter with all his might, he secretly, or maybe not so secretly, is quite ashamed of his daughter and the way she behaves, as he rightfully feels that she puts his good name to shame, despite his best efforts to, quote-unquote, guide her into a life of good. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that despite her young-looking appearance and teenage behavior, she is much older than any of us. In fact, she is older than any human will ever get to be, as she and all the other ethereal beings from the North Pole age differently than any of us humans do. Lucky them, huh? At first glance, and given her carefree nature, you could be easily fooled into thinking Jingle is just a spunky, silly, shallow blonde. But she is far from that. In fact, Jingle is a brilliant little pixie with an extensive knowledge in engineering and robotics. I mean, despite her difficult nature, she is one of Santa's main toy designers, capable of creating fully functional androids that can convincingly replace actual people, something that she has taken advantage of in the past. Like that time when she made a Jingle Belle double, who was well behaved, just like everyone wants her to be, and who took her place in Santa's workshop without anyone even noticing, all while she was vacationing with her friends on a fancy island. That is, until the Jingle Double overloaded and crashed. Now, just for the record, the Jingle Belle stories can perhaps seem a little simple at first, but trust me, they are actually very, very well written. I mean, it's Paul Dini writing this, come on. The humor on Jingle Belle is top level, and I really want to emphasize just how well written this series is. And just how much class the humor and comedy have, because some of the jokes are so subtle that they will only be noticed by those who are paying close attention, while some jokes are a little more on the nose, but are just as effective. There's always quite a bit of physical comedy within the stories, but nothing that could really be considered vulgar or in poor taste, despite Jingle's best efforts, of course. And let me tell you, this isn't an easy thing to accomplish, especially when you take into account that all stories conclude by going back to square one, and that by the end of each story, everything returns to the status quo, just like every TV show ever. So props to Mr. Dini for making it seem so easy. By the way, this probably explains why Jingle has never been published as a monthly series, but rather on several one-shot specials or mini-series. I mean, what better way to pick up the story where you left it without any excess baggage than by keeping the status quo intact, right? Very clever, Mr. Dini. And speaking of how clever Mr. Dini is, the Jingle Belle stories contain clever little nods and references to other properties, like George Lucas' Star Wars, the Rankin Bass Christmas specials, MTV's The Osbournes, Hanna-Barbera's Josie and the Pussycats, Disney's Frozen, and several others. But now I would really like to talk about the art from Jingle Belle, because you see, there have been many different artists working with Dini on this series, each with a very unique style. But I would like to highlight one of the artists, because there is one whom I personally think did it the absolute best, and that is Spike Brand. And please don't get me wrong, all the artists on Jingle are great, and every story is worth picking up, hands down. But there is something very, very unique about Spike Brand's work. It just stands out from the rest. Like I said, they are all great, and they all shine in their own special way. But Spike's style just seems like it was made for Jingle. He just gets the character. His lines are just so darn clean and fluid that the art just shines, even without colors. Which, by the way, I should have mentioned earlier. The first few Jingle Belle stories are black and white. But once again, the art is so good that it doesn't really matter, at least for me. But going back to Spike, sadly, besides Jingle Belle, Spike hasn't really done much in comics, save for a few variant covers for DC. Instead, he is far better known for his work in animation, having worked on some of the best animated series from the last 30 years, like Animaniacs, Looney Tunes, and Duck Dodgers, as well as several other high-profile projects for Warner Brothers. If you ever get the chance, please check out his work. He is amazing. Just amazing. And please do tell that I sent you to him. Jingle Belle's supporting cast is actually quite rich and colorful. In fact, I actually think they could even work on their own. But regardless, her best friends are Polly Green, Ida Red, and Tashi Elm. Polly Green is a powerful witch who lives in a huge magical tower, which is conveniently next to her parents' normal suburban home. Polly, despite being much more level-headed than Jingle, also seems to attract trouble wherever she goes. Now, unlike Jingle, there is something quite sad about her. Because unlike Jingle's family dynamic, Polly is in a much tougher position. Polly's family isn't particularly caring, or even have the best interest at heart, or any interest at all, other than self-profit, which is horrible. Despite this, though, Polly has a very positive disposition, and she always brushes it off. Polly would basically pretty much be the Halloween counterpart to Jingle, or the Tim Burton version perhaps. Ida Red is the cute but tough country music lover, badass Southern Belle. She's the young sheriff of Mutant, Texas, where she's responsible of keeping peas from either mutant monsters or hillbilly coyote. And just like Polly, Ida also has metahuman ability. in the form of energy projection blasts, which at first glance could be confused with fire-based powers, but are really just your regular powerful energy blasts, kind of like Cyclops or Starfire. And finally, Tashi, who is an anthropomorphic Tyvedian snow leopard, or a furry, who, despite being a good friend of Jingle, also happens to be her fierce competitor, especially when it comes to hockey, a sport which both characters vigorously engaged in, going as far as brawling in the middle of each game. But the friction doesn't really stop there. You see, Tashi, just like any other feline, is quite sassy and rather fierce and dominant, perhaps even a little overconfident, which clashes with Jingle's dominant personality, even outside of the hockey field, and especially when it comes to cute boys. Aside from her friends and her worldwide famous parents, she oftentimes comes in contact with other legendary figures, such as the infamous Krampus, who, just like in the folk tales, was responsible for punishing wickedly naughty children. Although in Jingle's stories, he seems to be long retired, and so in Jingle's universe, Krampus became a somewhat of an uncle figure to her. I mean, they're not related by blood, but they have a very similar dynamic. I would even dare say she has way more similarities with Krampus than with her own family, and so she gets along way better with him than with her father. There are other minor supporting characters, like the elves, especially poor Rusty, whom Jingle just loves to use as a punching bag. Or the anthropomorphic animals from the North Pole, like Trasher, her pet muskox, who uses farts as a way to propel through the sky, kinda like Harley has been doing recently. Muskox seems to come straight out of a Ren and Stimpy cartoon, by the way, which I love. But seriously, the only characters with any real weight in the stories are her friends and family, and that's how it seems to work best. Now, after all these years, Mr. Dini has made Jingle so popular that she has been drawn by some of the biggest names in the industry, like Kyle Baker, Alex Ross, Sergio Aragonés, Frank Cho, Steven DeStefano, Mike DeCarlo, Dave Alvarez, Greg Horn, Jay Bone, and many others. She was even featured in one of the Simpsons specials, or on the cover at least. Now, you might be thinking, with all this success, why hasn't she made the leap to animation or live action? Well, Mr. Dini has been approached by studios several times, and Jingle has been close to being featured in the big and small screen, but with no luck so far. The closest thing to this would be some Flash animated shorts that Mr. Dini produced for his website. But other than that, no luck so far. And it is in part due to Mr. Dini's refusal to give up ownership of the character, similar to the Calvin and Hobbes Bill Watterson situation, which I very much respect. So good for you, Mr. Dini. Though I do hope Jingle Belle gets an animated series at one point, or at least a Christmas special. I mean, she is perfect for animation, and she has all the right ingredients to become a fan favorite. So let's cross our fingers. Now, with the success Jingle Belle has had, it's only natural that there should be merchandise, right? Well, there are 2 beautiful Jingle Belle statues, as well as a lunchbox, and some really cool Christmas tree ornaments, as well as a Funko bobblehead and some other neat stuff, which sadly doesn't even begin to compare to the worldwide phenomenon that Harley Quinn has become. But give her some time. I think she will eventually be discovered by a wider audience, or at least I hope so. And just for the record, I think it goes without saying that Mr. Dini has always been a respected writer and was a familiar face amongst animation enthusiasts even before he ever worked on Batman. But it wasn't until he worked on Batman the Animated Series that his name truly skyrocketed into worldwide fame, not only by writing the best episodes on that show, but by co-creating the quite possibly biggest female character in comics, or any medium at least right now, the one and only Harley Quinn, who, by the way, is somewhat of a spiritual sister to Jingle. Kinda, I don't know. But I hope Harley's popularity ends up helping Jingle somehow. But anyways, Jingle Belle is yet another proof that Mr. Dini can write any genre, character, or theme and do it well, or even better than well, as Jingle Belle is truly something special. I would even dare say she's one of Mr. Dini's best creations, or at least one of my favorite ones, because when you read any of her stories, you can really tell how much love and effort is put into each and every single one of her stories. Not to mention how much fun Mr. Dini seems to be having when he writes her, which makes it even more enjoyable and special. By the way, if you're interested in reading any of the Jingle Belle stories, I highly recommend getting the Jingle Belle The Whole Package paperback, as it includes every story published so far, or at least before 2016. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. Now, let's just hope Jingle Belle returns very soon to enchant us once again with her sweet, wicked charms. As always, thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Be safe and well. And remember to be nice. You wouldn't want to end up in Santa's naughty list, would you?
Jingle bell, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey, jingle bell, jingle all the way. Come on, there's a bomb in there. Come on. Put that cookie down. Get into the chopper. The state of California. Ah.